Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. What an absolute pleasure it is to be back here for the third edition of SheShakti with a wonderful set of guests to start our conversations with this morning. There's a lot of universality in what you heard our previous speakers talk about, and we were discussing just that mindset and the need for mindset change being one of them. And I think that is something that there is consensus on, that we need to do a far better job of. But my guests today are path breakers, are trailblazers in their own right. We've already found some common threads between us. All three of us have a connection with the Indian Armed Forces. My father was in the Indian Air Force, as was Mugdha's father, was also in the Indian Air Force. And Priyanka is now a third-generation Indian Army officer. She's had her entire family play their part for the Indian Army, and of course is also married to an Army officer at this point in time. And for the benefit of all of you who probably are Googling her at this point in time, let me help you with that. In recognition of her distinguished services, she's been twice awarded the Army Commander's Commendation Card. So that is Colonel Priyanka Singh. And I was telling Mugdha, she spent the last 26 years in the civil services, and there's a lot of critique and criticism that happens when we talk about the Indian bureaucracy, but the Indian bureaucracy also wields the pen, and very often the pen can have a very, very direct and meaningful impact, and she's kind of been leading that change in different aspects of her career. She's taken on the sand mafia, she's taken on the mafia of different kinds, and a headline captured her journey, which said an officer who's been transferred 13 times in 15 years. So, Mugdha, thank you very, very much for joining us here. Colonel Singh, let me start by asking you, for you, it was almost as if this is something that's been passed on from one generation to the next. So it wasn't even as much of a choice that you had to make. You believed that the Indian Armed Forces were truly your calling.
Good morning to everybody. Jai Hind. And firstly, I'm so humbled and proud to be addressing this August gathering. I would like to thank the Indian Army, the organization I serve with great pride. I would like to thank News18 for giving me this opportunity. So coming back to your question, yes, Indian Army was undoubtedly my choice, the first choice and the only choice. I belong to a family where the blood is not red, it's olive green. So I'm a third generation officer with my father, grandfather, both being from 18 Cavalry, having seen the 71 war, the Independence War, the Burma campaign. So for me, there was no other place, there was no other color I could identify with. So I've grown up with my parents, seeing them in this olive green uniform, traveling length and breadth of the country. So I think I was so immersed and so enthralled by this profession, I would say passion of my father, that I had no other better choice to make. And here I am in front of you feeling accomplished. There was another thought that always ran through my mind, that I wanted, before my father hung his boots, I must wear the uniform. And it was in 2003 when my father retired, and 2003 I joined the forces. So that's my story.
Well, what a fabulous story that is, Colonel Singh, and what a proud moment it must have been for your father as he was stepping out of uniform, for you to be donning uniform. I mean, that must have been such a special moment.
Absolutely.
And I will come to you now with what you're currently doing. Ladies and gentlemen, we're talking about supply chain resilience. In the context of a Trump world, in the context of COVID, supply chain management, supply chain resilience has become the buzzword. But what Colonel Singh is actually doing is managing supply chain for the Indian Army. She's making sure that 5,000 troops in the northern sector get uninterrupted supply and keep our borders safe. So she is commanding that battalion at this point in time. What has been the hardest aspect of this tenure so far?
So I think as long as the stars are shining bright on your shoulder, brighter than the ones in the sky, so there's nothing challenging. But notwithstanding, I will still quote something. So when I was given the command of my unit, I was addressing my troops, and I had almost 500 boys in front of me, all staring and looking at me, waiting for something to come up, waiting with some expectations. So that was the time I think it threw a very big challenge for me as to how am I going to live up to their expectations. So within a month's time, I think I had this great challenge in front of me when I had to move my battalion to Eastern Ladakh. It's a very, very harsh terrain. It's a terrain full of challenge, not only health-wise, but location-wise as well. So that was a very big challenge when I moved my unit almost 1,000 kilometers away. Lock, stock and barrel and everything moved out. Stayed there for 3 months, delivered my role, came back. And what I found, every man ship shape, medically fit, all equipment fit, and my unit was back in place. So I think that's where I delivered, I surpassed my challenge, and that was the hallmark of what I had committed to myself. And thereafter there was no stopping, and it's been 2 years of my command, and I happily and feel very accomplished when I sit here and talk about it.
Well, what a fabulous 2 years it has been, and I'll talk a little bit more to you in just a second, but let me bring Mugdha Sinha into the conversation. For you, the choice to join the Indian Administrative Services was made by your mother, not by you. When you were all of 5, she decided that the IAS was going to be your calling, and that is how it worked out.
That's right. So they say no, when you articulate your desire into the universe, then the universe conspires and ensures that you achieve it. So thank you. It's so nice to hear Colonel Priyanka speak about her experience. So yes, there was a time in my life because my maternal grandfather wanted my mother to be an IAS officer, but he passed away while my mother was just about to take her 10th board exams. And so I think somewhere that that dream in my mother's mind remained, and she thought I was a fit candidate to be groomed into becoming an IAS officer. See, taking the exam in the UPSC does not make you an officer. An officer has to become. And I think the grooming from a childhood, and it doesn't just apply to the UPSC, it could also apply in Priyanka's case. Whatever you want to be in life, you have to become that. The exam might just be a step on that journey, but it is who you are becoming. There is some amount of adulting that happens. When I entered the service at about 24 and a half, and who I am today is very different beings. So there are different beings in me at every point in time. And I think it is the becoming that we must always invest in. And I'm very, very glad that I've had this opportunity to be in the service of the nation for the last 26 years now.
Well, the last 26 years have had many dramatic moments as well. And as you rightly said, that, we evolve. And I think women more so. What was it like when you actually started your career, all at the age of 24? What were some of the challenges that you faced then? We talked about mindset and whether mindsets have actually changed. Have they really, truly?
So I think, yes, we heard the last panel people talk about mindset. I, joined the service straight from college, So I was in LSR and then JNU, and I was a frock-wearing college petite.
Frock-wearing?
Yes, college girl. I was into skirts and frocks, and suddenly that adulting happened, and I wore my third time my sari at the interview, and then thereafter turned into a lady after becoming, coming into the IAS. So that transition happened there. But, your grooming in the service happens when you start doing your independent assignments. And I'm extremely grateful to my first mentor, and I never forget to recognize him, because he was a stalwart in the service, a man of integrity, a man of character, who gave me a lot of opportunity, who actually groomed me, much like my mother who groomed me to be an IAS officer. When I joined the service, he actually groomed me. And when people talk of gender and they talk of how women help women, if you get a woman in the right place, your grooming will happen. But I have found that, there's a good balance. I'm kind of believe in the Buddha's middle path always, and I see that, we have to coexist. The two halves of the world have to coexist. And it is very, very important to understand how men and women can work together. I'll give you one small example from the same gentleman. When I entered the service, and I quote this very often, he was from Haryana. He was a typical Haryanvi officer who was in the IPS before, then joined the IAS. So he got the flavor of both. So one day I asked him, "So what is it to be a civil servant?" And it was not a gendered question, but the answer came in this manner. He said, "Dekh chori, if you are a man, resourceful, outgoing, dynamic, I said, oh. And I said, what is it to be a lady officer? You know, because as she said, once you don the uniform, you are just an officer. We don't face challenges which are physical like she does. We face challenges which are more psychological or more of the cranial or the cerebral matter. So then I had to ask him that question. And he said, hardworking, sincere, obedient. I said, oh. So coming from JNU and being slightly argumentative, I could not resist myself. And I said, sir, I've been given to understand that I'm hardworking, sincere, and obedient, and that's why I'm here. I've cleared the exam. But in college, they also made me understand that I was outgoing, resourceful, and dynamic. So why can't I be both? So he said, Dekh chori, you want to be a homemaker or a homebreaker? I said, but it's not about homemaking or breaking. Where did home come into the office space? Yeah. You know, but that was the mindset when I began from a very, very good mentor. You know, I would wear without sleeve salwar kameez, and he told me, Dekh chori, agar successful hona hai na, तो ये बंद बाजू के कपड़े पहनो. मैंने कहा सर उदयपुर में तो लोग पूरा बैकलेस पहनते हैं, तनी वाला कपड़ा पहनते हैं, वो तो गांव में भी लोग तनी वाला कपड़ा पहनते हैं, and you are asking me to wear full sleeves. You know, so these are mindsets, and I think the more we create silos in society, you know, talking of emphasizing gender, because it's not just gender, it's gender, class, community, religion, everything. How many divisions will you create? I think we need to coexist and co-collaborate, because life is all about teamwork. You know, marriage is teamwork. Office is teamwork. So I believe in getting these civil service and civil society is teamwork. So I think I would want to be the bridge that transcends all these diversities and understands the nuances that are there. And I don't think that only women can help, though I believe in the sisterhood of women. I want women to have each other's back. Yeah. But I also feel that sometimes, you know, it's people who are secure, comfortable in your own skin, who can do better, whether they are women or whether they are men. So I think what we must do is raise this whole acclimatization and socialization that happens, so that as human beings we can help each other.
Absolutely.
I think we should not see people in who they are. There has been a point, Shereen, when I've had to tell a particular person that please look at my note sheets and not at the way I smile, okay, to understand the seriousness of the work that I do.
Yeah. No, I couldn't agree more with you. But, you know, since we're talking about mindset change, and you'll see a chair being brought in because we do have our third guest, the Consumer Affairs Secretary, Nidhi, Khare, just joining us. She was called in for a meeting with the Cabinet Secretary, so she's joining us a little later. Nidhi Khare, ladies and gentlemen, please give her a big round of applause. Thank you so much for joining us here this morning. And like our other two panelists, she's also spent a large part of the last 20 plus years in the IAS, and of course has just signed an order that this Consumer Protection Authority has signed this morning, and that's probably why she's been kept away and has been delayed. But thank you so much for joining us here. I'll come to you in just a second. But Colonel Singh, you know, we were talking about this need for a mindset change, but we were also talking about mentorship and allyship with men, because that is important, as Mugdha Sinha was pointing out. In the Indian Army, I mean, that's what, you know, you've been surrounded by men, not by women. In fact, the women are few and far between. What has that been like, and how have you dealt with channeling your own energy and spreading the message across that this is a service that other women should consider?
So as far as what ma'am just brought out, that it's a teamwork in the organization. It's not about gender. It's not about men, women. If you see the Indian Army, it's only numerically it's more men. But if you see the work, it's capability, it's togetherness, it's cohesiveness, it's a teamwork that matters. So I would just give you an example of when I just joined the SSB. I was interviewed by the SSB. That system was so methodologically correct that it saw no gender. All it saw was your capability, your officer-like qualities. No male, no female. Coming on to my training, the training methodology is absolutely neutral. And now I talk about having got commissioned into the Indian Army. Since then until date, I think neutrality is the environment in which I grew up. So I first take this opportunity to thank all the men who've helped me grow up and come and sit here. And they are the ones who've guided me, who've mentored me. So let me tell you, when you're commanding a unit or when you're commanding a body of troops, your men look at you as an individual and not as a lady or a man. They look at you as a person who can guide them, who can lead them by self-example or various other things. So they are looking at you as a person who has the capability to do that, and not as a person, whether you're a man or a woman. So I think Indian Army is a very good example of gender neutrality, as I can tell you with great conviction that I'm sitting here because of that fact.
Yes, and I hope more organizations learn from the Indian Armed Forces and really create spaces that are gender neutral, where capability is what, and competence is what matters. Ms. Khare, thank you so much for joining us here again this morning. You know, as we were just discussing, we're talking here in the capital. We're sitting in a wonderful air-conditioned hotel, and we're talking largely to women who come from a certain privilege. We've had the ability to make our choices. That's not the case for a large part of this country still. And that is actually what I want to address with you, because pretty much at the start of your career in the IAS, that's the reality that you had to contend with. That's the reality that you had to cope with. I didn't even know that there was something called Dayan Hatya, and that, you know, it was a reality in India's recent history, and that is what you were up against. What was that like for you?
So while I agree with my co-speakers here that the services, even the civil services, has never made any distinction between, you know, who you are, and even the people, you know, where we have served largely were men only. But since I have served in both Bihar and Jharkhand, there also you were taken up more as a professional and as a good leader, as a good executor, and not so much about the gender. However, the reality is definitely for a large part of society has been such that, you know, there were some cases of this Dayan Hatya, and in my early, very, very early, you know, postings, this must be about, I think, 1997 or so, where...
And 1997, ladies and gentlemen, is not very far back. Can you imagine that this was the reality in 1997 in India that a young IS officer had to deal with?
So I was told that, you know, the place of my posting was very peaceful, but I came to know that occasionally, you know, there were these Dayan Hatya cases which were open and shut, you know, and the police also, they just thought that, you know, it is the village community which perpetuated this crime, and they came with the head of the witch, you know, and along also with some of these weapons which were used to kill her. And therefore, nobody followed up, and therefore it was treated just like a, you know, some kind of an incident. And therefore we thought that why this is injustice towards women, because for very small things like because people did not have access to health infrastructure, if there was some person who died or was suffering with some disease, it was, you know, some woman who maybe of some low stature or maybe a widow, they were branded as witches. And the worst is, if you are thinking that it was only for tribal society, it was not. You know, it was permeating all societies and all faiths, you know, all religion. And therefore we started with a, you know, mass awareness, because we thought if people are made aware that there is nothing like, you know, some, say, some such thing, then probably we can bring down the crime or atrocities against women. And we involved everybody, you know, media, lawyers, politicians, people's representatives, panchayats, you know, everybody, including the community leaders and so on. And therefore, from there, I think Bihar became the first state to actually enact prevention of, say, witch activities, 1999. And thereafter, many other states
followed. Yeah.
Other states also followed. So this showed the extent of, you know, the problem that was existing, which I thought it was only, you know, localized.
Yeah. But it also shows the extent of the power that you enjoy and what change truly can happen if an officer decides to put their will and their might and exercise the actual powers that they have to try and make change happen, and that was very, very clear. But that's what I want to address with you. From a policy perspective, you were also involved with the DBT, which is the direct benefit transfer program that the government has put in place, which also ensures that, the benefits reach the actual person that deserve the benefits or are entitled to the benefits. That is another example of policy working for people, not people working for policy. So as somebody in the IAS, as you're looking at governance, what have been some of the key lessons that you take away that you believe we need to focus on and prioritize?
So when we started with the direct benefit transfers, that was 2013, and virtually there were hardly any takers because it was considered to be too theoretical, and we were basically targeting, all the beneficiaries who belong to, poor strata, and therefore they were illiterate, and including, half of them were women whose financial inclusion, wasn't there. I mean, it was very poor. So it was a very, very challenging task, and there were, people who would think, this will not work in our country. I mean, these things can only, work in a country which is very, very, wealthy and very tech savvy. Still, we thought that this is very important that the money or the benefits which are belonging to a beneficiary must reach without, any delay. And the petty corruption that is often associated because of these fat layers of bureaucracy, that should also go. And therefore, we thought that we must actually have bank accounts, have it, seeded with Aadhaar, and how we need to do it. It was a very, very gigantic, very, very difficult task, actually. And but I'm very, very happy that, I took that challenge up, and we started designing the process flow, the funds flow, and we came out with such a brilliant work that today nearly every cash benefit, whether it is pension, whether it is scholarship, whether it is entitlements, everything, including, the money from the state governments, all these flow on a DBT platform.
And it is one of the world's largest financial inclusion exercises. So congratulations to Nidhi, Khare, and many officers like her who've helped take that forward. But Mugdha Sinha, if I could ask you, while we're talking about policy, we're talking about governance architecture, let's also talk a little bit about what it takes to actually be able to move through the rank and file, the rungs of this governance architecture, especially as women. The assumptions are that, you would not face the patriarchal challenges, you would not face the patriarchal roadblocks that are often associated with other sectors. But that may not necessarily be the case. Do you want to share some examples of what it was like for you and how you decided to overcome that?
So I'll give you an example from my SDM days. So Ajmer in Rajasthan was usually typecast as a district for lady officers. I don't know whether, ma'am, in Bihar or Jharkhand also you have districts which are assigned. And when I entered the service, I was told that you will get to have one collectorship for sure, because that the state has to give you. The rest you have to earn on your merit, and it's not happened that women end up doing more than two. So I said, well, okay. I was in my office, I had a retired patwari with me, and we used to celebrate the birthdays of the staff. The SDM office doesn't have many people, there are 4 or 5 people, so you work. I stayed there for about 2.5 years, so kind of developed a good rapport with my staff. So in one of these birthday celebrations of the staff, I was just asking them about the other lady officers who had said and what they liked about them, what they liked about me, what they disliked about the others and about me and stuff like that. So in one of these interactions, the retired patwari who was assisting us, he told me, Madam, देखिए, आदमी जब गुस्सा करते हैं, तो हमें बुरा नहीं लगता है. But lot of women, when they scold us, when they throw files on us, etc., it hurts us. So I said, why? Because they say that, well, men have a right to be angry because maybe we are not doing something which is right. But when women get angry, the perception that we get is that they don't know their work. You know, that was a eureka moment in my life because, you know, we don't understand how the society perceives who we are. I've never been a very angry person by nature. I've been a very calm, composed person. But that day I realized that, you know, if I'm ever angry, because there are moments when you have to be angry, my anger will always be deliberate. It will not be something which will come from, you know, like within. It will not be a rushed, unthought of anger. So that was one moment in time I realized that this is how people perceive you. I also realized when I grew up later that it helps to be, you know, to alchemize your anger into what you call satire. So I've seen that has worked really nicely. Because if some people are not moving, I'll just say, "Bhai, nariyal foda jaye, kya aapke liye kariye na bhai, kya ho raha hai?" You know, that would help move things rather than being angry. So these are things that one learned in the service. But I can tell you there are 4 P's that I have faced in my life. Patriarchy, of course, we face in different ways. You know, at a more cruder level, what ma'am has said is probably witchcraft. If you look at the history of witchcraft, and there's nice books on witchcraft, I didn't know that you'd mention this, but I've been doing some readings on witchcraft. You'll realize just pre the Enlightenment, when women knew a lot about science and sorcery and magic, and the men didn't understand that, those women who stood out, became the witches in society, the 3 witches of Macbeth also for that matter. So it also happens in very subtle ways, where you are typecast not as people don't call you a witch or a Dian, but they say that they give you the same kind of reaction without calling you by that name, right? And we faced it. So I think one of the P's is P's of patriarchy that one faces. The other P is a very subtle and a very nuanced way, which I'm sure most of us face, is patronizing. You know, patriarchy is, you know, we all know patriarchy is all shades of black. But patronizing, you know, when somebody wants to take you under the wing and is also trying to do the same thing, but in a more subtle way, is more dangerous because it's got 50 shades of gray in it. And then I think the other P that I also faced is a lot of plagiarism. You know, just because of a woman, if you have a path-breaking idea which is much in advance of the time, then somebody will just learn from you and use it in meetings and say that, okay, you know, that kind of a thing, that is very, very dangerous, I think. And it happens more with women because you would want to, you know, you have to prove yourself.
Yeah, and we don't talk about it enough. We don't talk about our own achievements enough. Yes. We need to change that too.
And also, if you stand in your power, if you believe in who you are authentically, then I think you create ripples and you create ripples across gender. There the sisterhood also falls at times to be able to have your back. So I think a lot of adulting has happened in good ways, I would say, to teach you who you are. Because see, life is your own journey. I mean, I keep saying this, that while the letters in livelihood will be, you know, longer than life, but all your life is your preparation, and the livelihood is just a very small part of your life subset. So you have to become who you are for the life that you have. Because while I might retire at 60, I'll still have a life beyond my livelihood.
Absolutely.
And I think the livelihood, by, you know, putting you in touch with people, different kinds of people in our service. I think the beauty of the service, and I would never want to trade off with anything else, is the kind of diverse sets of people.
Absolutely. And
suddenly
that
you will be meeting one, you know, if I can say, the likes of the Tatas and the Birla, and suddenly you will be meeting people like what ma'am has been mentioning. That range
and diversity,
I think, is the beauty of the service, and that range gives you an experience which I don't think anything could
prepare you
give
for.
Yes,
Absolutely.
yes.
We're unfortunately out of time, but Ms. Khare, let me get wrap-up comments from you as well as Colonel Singh. The three things that you would like to leave this audience that's here with us in the room, as well as those who are watching us on TV and online, the three lessons from your life that you would like to leave us with.
No, I would just say that, when empowerment of women is spoken about, it should be not just, where I have reached. It is actually how much I have empowered other women, whether they were your colleagues, whether they were people who needed your help, your guidance, and so on. So I think, and then, self-belief that you can do this, challenge yourself every day, and then try to see, okay, what is the next, so-called glass ceiling which has to be broken.
To breaking many, many more glass ceilings, Colonel Singh, the final comments with you.
Yeah, so my final message to everyone is, I think you need to break the self-doubt. The day you break the self-doubt, you've broken the barriers, you've broken the glass ceiling. So that's the summing up line. And I'm just reminded of a small quote which I'd like to share. If you know your job well, if you have the professional competence, if you have the professional knowledge, you know your job well, and the people you command know that you know your job well, I think you've done your job.
Absolutely. Here's to angry women, here's to happy women, and here's to empowered women. Here's to women who know their worth and are not afraid to speak for themselves and to speak up for other women as well. Colonel Priyanka Singh, Mugdha, Sinha, Nidhi, Khare, thank you so much for joining us here. Ladies and gentlemen, a big round of applause for our change makers here this afternoon. Appreciate your time.
Keep that applause going, ladies and gentlemen, for this very powerful conversation. Thank you, Nidhi ji, Mugdha ji, and Colonel Priyanka for that very enlightening, resilient conversation. Thank you, Shereen, as well. All right. I'm sure you'll all agree that this was a confidence-building conversation as well, one that has instilled us with a new lease of hope. Up next, we present two extraordinary women who have each carved out remarkable journeys of influence and inspiration while sharing their lives with some of the nation's most prominent leaders. Both have built dynamic careers fueled by vision and passion. One leads a top media enterprise while the other dedicates herself to education and social impact. To take us through this inspiring journey of visionary leadership and impact, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Shweta Punj. And now, it is also our privilege to invite on stage